Hey, welcome to the Exchange. Let's take a look at this container supply chain crisis, what's going on with the ports of LA right now. When's it going to end? How the numbers are actually looking right now, and potentially what's the future going to hold for us? So this is an article from November. This is looking at the California docks. So basically, they're seeing basically supply chain easing, basically like looking at progress across the board. And remember these pictures from last September October timeframe of all these container ships basically anchored right off the port of LA and basically the port of Long Beach as well too, sitting offshore. I mean, it's just a bad PR look. It looked pretty bad. So those ships are gone now. They actually changed some of the rules around where they can anchor at, where they can basically loiter at, and they're basically further out to sea. So it's definitely been a change there. So this is what they look like. There's the pictures. This is from Quartz. Looking at those container ships offshore. So it's saying November 16th, there was a high of 86 container ships for just San Pedro Bay, which is the port of LA alone, which is pretty high. And those are breaking records for that single port alone. But then they look at the actual data. This is for the actual LA, port of LA, basically their operations dashboard. As of right now, this is from March 11th. They only have 48 ships. So, I mean, almost a 40% decrease in ships waiting. Basically, I have two different columns here. So column A basically is the within 40 nautical miles, there's only two ships. And then column B is basically slow or adrift or anchored offshore 150 kilometers out or 150 nautical miles out to the sea. It's 48 ships. So it is getting better. The data is definitely getting better. Let's dive into some of the data real fast. So this is a very, very important chart. This basically breaks down container dwell time. So what dwell time is when it's offloaded from the actual container ship and put on the actual dock itself, the dwell time starts at that point. You basically start the dwell clock. So obviously, supply chain crisis, I mean, goods do no good for waiting on the dock, waiting for the trucks or trains to get basically from the dock to the actual fulfillment centers to basically to end consumers right there. So ideally, you want as little time as possible to dwell, and want those basically goods push off the actual dock itself and push in the actual supply chain. So you really see here. I mean, this is from October 24th all the way to March 6th. I mean, really a massive drop in late October, November timeframe. This is really the blue line right here. This is all import containers. I mean, it's settled down quite a bit, roughly around 50,000-60,000 for the port of LA. So really since around Christmas time frame. The thing notice here is this is like the different columns. 0 to 4 days is the orange line. It's been pretty flat, and this is the ideal line. You want containers to move out as quickly as possible. But the bad ones are this yellow and the gray here, which is 9+ days or 5 to 8 days, which are down here. And those have had massive decreases quite a bit in the last, even 3 or 4 months, looking at February, March timeframe. I mean, it is pretty small over across the board. I mean, you've seen the right hand since October 24th. I mean, just massive decreases in dwell time. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, obviously, supply chain crisis easing a little bit. It's not as bad as it was last fall, Q4 retail for like Christmas time frame and the Thanksgiving time frame. They changed some of the rules too. So they actually started charging. They didn't actually implement this, but they started charging potentially or mentioning we're going to charge $100 fee per day per day the container left actually at the dock itself there too. So obviously, if you're a shipper or a company, hey, your whole goal there, no matter what it costs, get those containers off the dock and the actual either personal supply chain fulfillment centers or just even on trucks and send them somewhere else. Get them off the actual dock itself there, get the things moving. So this is this almost fear of a new cost really drove the actual impetus for the actually moving those things and getting really a jump starting those supply chain kind of like journey for these containers and some of these end product goods for consumers. So this is another article. This is from last October timeframe. But people don't realize empty containers are commodity within themselves. Really having the actual 20-foot or 40-foot equivalent, basically 40-foot long containers. I mean, that's a very, rich commodity right there. Because obviously, if you're a Chinese manufacturer, Chinese shipper, if you can't put your goods in a container shipped to the U.S., then obviously you're out of luck at that point. So you either buy a new container itself or potentially have a used one coming back from the U.S. right here. So I mean, we really had this massive problem where we had goods sitting at Chinese ports in Shanghai or other places like that, sitting there, I mean, ready to ship, ready to go. They just didn't have a container to actually go into it. You actually put on the boat, and then once you're on the boat, actually you have dock delays and everything else too. So it's almost like this compounding effect that's been happening for months and months and months. So I'm pulling up this chart right here. This chart basically shows empty containers at the port of LA right here. You want this number to be as low as possible, obviously. So the idea is you have imported goods coming in containers. They're offloaded. You have offloaded basically empty containers coming back to the port of LA, being like, hey, these containers are ready to go back to China or East Asia, wherever they're going to. And then from there, basically the whole cycle fulfills itself, and then basically have that highly efficient cycle happening. So you can see right here this is from November timeframe, November, December. I mean, huge spikes, roughly on 80,000. But I mean, since then, in the March timeframe, it's been a steady decline, almost pretty linear across the board, which this should keep dropping. And then as containers basically go back to China, you basically have cheaper container prices for Chinese, literally putting your stuff on a container itself. Then as the port itself eases up, you're gonna have cheaper shipping rates, and they're gonna drop over time too. So But hopefully these two things compound together and create basically a cheaper overall shipment cost to the U.S. and then hopefully that cost is passed, or the savings are passed to the consumers in into the game, which hopefully should drop inflation. I know right now obviously energy inflation is absolutely top of mind issue right now, but the back end inflation for overall just consumer goods or industrial goods, that's another important thing for long term inflation kind of projections or potentially long term deflation if it happens. A couple last points I want to mention out here too. This is a chart basically showing from 2019 to 2022. This is the global container shipping freight rates index. So we really would see here the spike around September, October is really those like max fears you saw in the port of LA of all container ships stationed off right off the coast right there. You saw empty container set, basically too many empty containers in the U.S. markets, not enough in the Chinese markets. It's starting to balance out though. We're starting to have that change right now. That's why you're really seeing this, the drop really, in really the December time frame, and it's really been flat for right now for January and February for 2022. Now this thing as it eases up more and more and more, potentially this should drop pretty fast and pretty hard, maybe this summer or this fall time frame, which should help out the actual inflationary kind of pressures we have right now. So as shipment and freight costs drop, those costs should be passed on to end consumers. Hopefully, we'll see, but it may not happen though too. But yeah, I think there's a chance here. This is one of those things where once energy prices settle down with the whole Ukraine crisis, this is the next wave of deflationary pressures we have coming in as things kind of reset in this post kind of Omicron or post COVID world we have right now, and hopefully the post Ukraine crisis world we have hopefully coming up pretty soon. So this is another chart real fast. This is from the port of LA. It's showing their basic shipment volumes. I mean, they're basically matching and exceeding roughly year over year basic comparables in shipment volumes. This is also from the port of Long Beach as well. So the big number here is, hey, loaded inbound, they're 5.6% to the upside year over year. So they're bringing in more containers year over year than they were last year, even though last year was a blowout year. I mean, they're doing everything possible can to basically get reset as a supply chain, as an economy coming in from China and East Asia and everywhere else. Hey, but that's just some of the data I've been looking at for the overall container shipping rates and everything else too. Definitely let me know your thoughts. If you think, hey, it's going to resolve by this summer or this fall time frame, or if at all, maybe this is me permanent, sticky inflation we have going forward. But there's a chance here that this might be a deflationary trend in the next 3 to 6 months time frame, especially after this post-Ukraine crisis, also potentially post-COVID kind of variants, anything happening out in the near future. But yeah, if you like the channel overall, hit subscribe down below. If you like the overall video, hit the like button down below, and yeah, have a good day.